Same stuff, different day for the Indiana Pacers. Their first half stunk. They got down a bunch. They came all the way back. They still lost. They scored 90 points and lost again. Man, oh man, do we have a lot to discuss from Pacers Nets on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Thursday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, oh man, another loss for the Pacers. 4 in a row. That is their longest losing streak of the season. They look rough. Right now, they've looked rough a lot of this year. They look extra rough right now, dropping this game in Brooklyn. A 4-game losing streak with 3 of the losses being the Pistons, Raptors, and Nets certainly hurts and says a ton about the state of the Pacers. We'll discuss this game first, the specifics of their loss, starting with, of course, their dreadful first half, even worse than yesterday's dreadful first half for the same team. We'll talk about the state of this group, their current reality. I want to talk about what 9-14 really is. It's bad. It doesn't sound super bad. It's bad, and it actually should probably be thought of worse than it sounds. And then we'll talk about the few good things that happened, because that's what I do. Johnny Furphy deserves at least 2 minutes of my time today. The Pacers lost 99-90. That's the second time this season the Pacers have lost a game holding their opponent under 100. Huh? That's the pace. That was supposed to be their whole thing. They scored 99 or more every game last year. They've been under 100 4 times already this year. Just a remarkable drop on offense. Even on nights their defense is okay to good. I mean it. Like tonight, it was all right. It didn't matter at all. They gave themselves a chance. They came back and tied it in the fourth quarter at 80 and still lost by 9. So there's kind of two splitting paths I thought about when talking about where they lost this game. The last 8 minutes, where they stunk. Really, it tied at 80 with 8 minutes to go. And then I think the 2:45 mark, they were down double digits. It was a 17-4 Nets run. Like, they couldn't do anything. It was crazy. Couldn't do anything at that stage. Down double digits again. They couldn't score. They couldn't get stops. But I figured I would kind of lump those in together, because what I just said is they couldn't score and they couldn't get stops. That was the whole first half again, right? The Raptors game was the same way. And that game was crazy because of mostly just the turnovers. Like, the Pacers, when they actually got a shot up, had okay efficiency. In the first half of this game, nope, they had neither. 35 points in a half for this Pacers group. They scored 45 in one quarter 4 days ago. What is happening to this team? And it was different kind of causes this time. The Pacers had 12 turnovers in the first half. That's way too many, full stop. But that's not even that's putting it rosy. All 12 were in one quarter. All 12 were in the second quarter. What? The Pacers had 16 turnovers in this game against the Nets. That's too many. Rick Carlisle said after the game, too many turnovers. Okay, that's great. They only had the turnovers in 2 of the 4 quarters. In the first and third quarter combined, the Pacers had no turnovers in a game that they finished with 16. It was unbelievable. So that was the first sinking, like, oh, what are they doing? Just like, when they say disconnected, and I think that hits people as like this, like, not excuse, but just like gobbledygook word, because they've been saying it so much. But when they keep having this many turnovers, like, it hits really hard to me. I think it's perfect. Like, they don't have that same last year, like, someone's going to be here and here, we can do this and that, it's going to work. And it just worked. And this year it's the opposite, where they struggle to know where people are, and guys get caught in double teams, they don't know how to get rid of it, and they turn it over. And so the second quarter, they had 12 turnovers. They were 6 for 16 from the field, saved by 3 threes and 3 offensive rebounds, giving them some extra chances. It was still a bad quarter. They scored 18 points in that quarter, held the Nets to 27. Held, that's fine. 27 is fine in the current NBA. But 12, it just stinks to see that. They looked horrible on offense. Good enough on defense, the whole game, really. But terrible offensive process. 18 points in that second quarter, like I just said. That wasn't even their worst quarter of the half. 17 in the first quarter for the Indiana Pacers. Again, they made 6 shots in the second quarter. Half of them were threes. In the first quarter, they made 7 shots. One of them was a three. I actually think they should be happy they got up 11 threes, and I didn't feel like any of them were bad because they've had a volume problem to me a little bit this year. 1 for 11 from deep, 7 for 23 from the field, only 1 offensive rebound. Doesn't matter if you get no turnovers. If you can't put the ball in the hole at all, it does not matter. So that first quarter is the opposite of Toronto. But both had the same result, awful offense. But early in Toronto, they couldn't score because they couldn't take care of the ball. Early in Brooklyn, they couldn't score because they couldn't put the ball in the hoop. And they were lucky that the Nets stunk even worse early. Like 5.5 minutes in this game, it was 6-3. After one quarter, they were only down 7. Right? They defended well enough to give themselves a chance. That's why they were able to come back later in the game. But their first half offense was just wildly bad. And it took them forever to get any rim pressure. Not to say they didn't have like an emphasis on it or they just couldn't have rim pressure, but they didn't have any rim pressure. So they had good, they were trying to move the ball. 7 shots made in the first quarter, 5 were assisted. That's pretty good, right? 6 made shots in the second quarter, 3 assisted. That's fine, right? The ball movement was all right. It was just not connected or to the right guy or to someone who had a chance to score or at least put pressure on the defense. It looked bad. It looked disconnected, like they said, as weird as that is to say. And that just can't be the problem for the Pacers. 35 points and a half. I did not look this up. Other people shared this. So please take it with a grain of salt that I heard this from other people. I like to look up the stats myself. 35 first half points for the Pacers are the lowest scoring half, as told by others, since 2021. Horrible. I was actually looking this up because someone said, oh my gosh, fire everybody, trade everybody. That's unacceptable in the modern NBA. The Celtics had 35 points in a finals game last year. So, it does happen. It's still awful when it happens. That was the only game of the finals the Celtics lost. So, what is going on? Because I understood it to be, and what my prediction was for the Pacers this year was they'd be a little better because their offense would be the same-ish and their defense would be bad. Again, but they'll just be a little bit better, lots of stuff with all these young guys, and they'll improve a little bit. Well, the problem with that thinking is, even if I was right until the last, let's say 7 days, although they defended okay today, about their defense, being a smidge better, their offense has been unbelievably worse. They can't score. The theory of the team falls apart when that happens. Below average offense for this team with this roster. That is just remarkable. And it's going to bleed into our entire second segment, contextualizing what's really going on for the Pacers, who after tonight are 21st in offensive rating. Huh? It's crazy. So their defense has climbed out of the bottom 5 after a couple games, but their offense is now in the bottom 10. Bottom 10 in both offense and defense, 25th in net rating. Again, they're lucky to me to have 9 wins. The teams with a better net rating than the Pacers, the 6-win Hornets, the 7-win Raptors, the 9 equal to the Pacers, Pistons, the 9-win Bulls have a better net rating than the Pacers, right? Every team behind them has 5 or fewer wins except for the Blazers, who've been the opposite of the Pacers. They've been bad in clutch games. Pacers have been good. So that's the level of team they're close to according to their per possession numbers. They did come back. And that makes what happened in this first half, 35 points, dreadful shooting, turnovers, disconnected play, all the more perplexing to me personally and presumably everyone. This is the second game in a row, and really, if you count the first quarter in Memphis and the fourth quarter in Detroit, several games in a row where they show they have a peak level that is very good, right? They can do good things. They can look a little bit like last year's team or a little bit like a capable, good team at times. Tyrese Haliburton had 9 points and 4 assists in the third quarter, plus 11 of them on the floor. TJ McConnell went 4 for 4 with a steal. He was plus 10. Siakam didn't even do much statistically, but his presence has been big for this team this year, plus 12 with him on the floor. Johnny Furphy hit 3 threes in that quarter, right? They got good stuff going. They made 7 foul shots. They scored 35 points. They put 11 points off of the Nets lead, and they were able to make a comeback eventually. They had that level in them tonight. I saw it. They did it. And they still lost by 9. And only scored 90 points on the road to the Nets. That's what makes their lows so confusing this year. Almost every game they looked dreadful for a stretch. They later that game or at some point previously had looked really good or showed that they had the blueprint to success that night. And it just couldn't happen all game. Maybe injuries are leading to lineup funk. But I can't get there. I can't get there with injuries at this point when it's just every game, no matter who isn't or isn't available, the same symptoms of whatever is caused here. Just not very good. They're just not very good until they can show 48 minutes of good play, right? Even when they won 3 in a row. Last week, by the way, that happened 1 week ago. I had JMV on, and that was the headline of our discussion. Are they actually turning a corner? Or no? Are these just bad opponents? And if so, what would it take for them to turn a corner? And we both said they need to crush someone, play good for a full game, beat it. Even their best wins, Dallas they did, but Boston no. Their last 8 minutes were dreadful, right? Like the Knicks game was a big fourth quarter flurry. They had some bad stretches that night. Like they just haven't shown it. And so this was another game where over half of the game was not showing that. Right? Much of the first half and then the last 8 minutes were dominated by the Brooklyn Nets. The Pacers are 9-14, and they're losing in ways that nobody thought they could lose this year by being a bad offensive team, a bottom 10 offensive team. That's how they lose to the Brooklyn Nets. That's how they fall to 9-14. 1 game left on this road trip. They have 4 games left of the cushiony part of their schedule before it gets extremely challenging again until late January. I've said this a million times. And it doesn't matter that I'm saying it. They have not done this at all. I keep saying they need to take advantage of this schedule stretch to keep their season on track. I highlighted a stretch from November 14th to December 15th, 14 games as a key time for the Pacers to potentially bank some wins and have a nice record. If they win all of the remaining games in that stretch, they will go exactly 500 in that stretch. They're not playing well against bad teams. What does that make the Pacers? Well, let's talk about the 9-14 Pacers in this second segment, their current reality. Let's talk about what 9-14 really is and how unusual it is for what the Pacers are right now. Before we do that, though, let's talk about Chime. We've all been there before, spending more than we should during the holidays. Take control of your finances by using a Chime checking account with features like no monthly or maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, and getting paid 2 days early with direct deposit. Learn more at chime.com/LockedOnNBA. Tons of people, even people you probably know, have had to deal with overdraft fees. Chime has financial technology and a company with a sense of community. They help you with fee-free overdrafts up to $200. You can get spotted on debit card purchases. They have over 50,000 fee-free ATMs, no monthly fees or maintenance fees. And eligible members can also be a part of their Spot Me program. Members of that have gotten over $32 billion spotted to them. You can set up direct deposits to your Chime account, all sorts of awesome features to help you out. And so you can enjoy the holidays while keeping your financial goals on track with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/NBA. That's chime.com/NBA. Feels like progress. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank NA or Stride Bank NA. Members FDIC. Spot Me eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Direct deposit timing depends on submission of payment file. Boosts are available to eligible Chime members enrolled in Spot Me and are subject to monthly limits. Fees apply to out-of-network ATM and for OTC withdrawals. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day and continuing to listen when the team does not play very well. I hope these are fun and interesting to you in some way. Make your second listen Locked On Nets. Doug and Adam crushed it over there. They have opposite senses of humor, not actually, but kind of, and opposite ways of approaching talking about the Brooklyn Nets and make a great duo. And I'm sure they're going to be buzzing talking about a Nets team that has a better record than the Pacers now. They both entered this game 9-13 on 3-game losing streaks. One team that is no longer the case. Okay, the Pacers are 9-14. I just said it. And I wanted to know I wanted to do some thinking here because 9-14 is like a bad record. Obviously, you're 5 games under 500. It doesn't like hit that hard as a bad record for some reason, but it is. Okay. And it's unusual for a team to be 9-14 that is really trying to win or is expected to win. Right. And I wanted to really dive into that because I've been covering the Pacers. I was really blogging for the first couple of years, but covering the team since their 2016 series, Pacers Cavs, right? Getting close to 10 years, which is wild. And back then, the team was trying to win and didn't ever really stretch just this bad. So I wanted to figure out a couple of things about 9-14. And the first thing I figured out was the last time they went 9-14 was not the last game, but one before that, the preceding 23 games of the end of the 2023 season. So Haliburton was hurt. He was done for the year. In his all-star year, that team started good, closed terrible to get a good draft pick. They got Jarris Walker. They were not really trying to win and didn't have expectations to win. So yeah, okay, nine wins in 23 games for a team in that reality makes sense to me. But before that, the last time I can remember and the last time I could find stretches where the Pacers went 9-14 or worse in a 23-game span and were really trying. There are two times it stands out to me. One is the very end, the very tail end of the 2018-19 season. They actually finished that season, the exact last 23 games, 9-14. And the reason that hit different than right now is because Victor Oladipo got hurt very dramatically in January of that season. They did not have their best player. They were scraping by with Bojan emerging a bit and like Sabonis emerging. And like those were good players. They were fine. They got smoked in the first round as a 5 seed, as a 48-win team. They were not that level of team when the playoffs rolled around. But it made sense why they went 9-14, even though it was painful and they weren't very good. Vic was out. He was their heart and soul and identity. Another stretch. This one's funny because this one fits this season a little better, but not really to me. The Pacers in 2021-22, Rick Carlisle's first season in this stint with the team. That team, the Brogdon, LeVert, Warren, Sabonis, Turner group to start that year. That team was trying. Jared Greenberg on the TNT broadcast of a Pacers Heat game was like, yeah, Rick Carlisle, people have asked questions about him taking a job for a team, trying to compete or not compete and all that, right? Like it was a storyline that year. And they stunk. You know what the Pacers started that year? 9-14. Through 23 games, that team was 9-14. Now, here's why that one felt different to me than this year's. I was texting with someone about this after this game. That team was 9-14, and it didn't feel like this because that team, yeah, they were trying to win, but they were under 500 the year before, right? So the expectations were not as high. Don't get me wrong, they were the 4 seed the year before that, but I think everybody kind of changed their expectation of that team. Like Vic was traded. They were under 500 the year before. They were really banged up. Like LeVert was always missing time. Warren missed the whole season. Brogdon was always missing time. So they were banged up. They weren't good the year before. Things were new with the new head coach. It didn't feel like, oh man, this team stinks. It just felt like there were a lot of reasons they were 9-14, chief among them being it just was like an okay team. And they won 25 games that year. So all that to say, it's very unusual for a team to be really going for it and go 9-14 in a 23-game stretch. Last year's Pacers, their worst 23-game stretch was 11-12. And they had like missed stars last year at times, and they didn't have Siakam half the year and all this stuff, right? So that is the context I wanted to start providing here. Is 9-14 is bad. It's really bad, right? Like it for a full season, 9 wins in 23 games does not translate to a good record. In fact, if I do the math right, it's 32 wins. The Pacers are very fortunate, to be clear, that the Eastern Conference stinks, completely stinks, right? They lost this game. They fell behind the Nets in the standings by losing this game. The Pacers are still 10th in the East right now. They're in a play-in spot right this second. That's not a good thing. If you're in the play-in, you have to play the Cavs, the Celtics in the first round. You don't want that. Pacers are 3 games out of 6. That's a lot. It's the Hawks. The Hawks are playing awesome basketball. The top 6 might be solidified if the Hawks are actually good. But not the East stinks. And the odds are the 2 teams right in front of them, the Nets and the Bulls, are going to have the bottom fall out because they wanted to at some point for draft reasons. Outside of the Pistons finding some footing, they've, by the way, lost every game since drubbing the Pacers last week, or the Sixers finding some footing. They're probably set to play it beyond the regular season, right? They probably just are. They could get to 8 like in a snap without playing that much better. They're only 1 game out of 8. It's crazy how bad the East is. So they're going to have the longest rope ever to turn things around. But they're playing bad. 9-14 is not good. And it's very rare for a team that's had healthy stars and is trying to win games to have a stretch this poor. Now, for a while, I kept finding like and this wasn't like me searching this out. Oh, let me find the optimist's take. There were just very obvious to me, like glass half full ways to look at the Pacers, right? Oh, they're really hurt, or like, okay, Haliburton's coming up in the clutch and like he's had good games. I think he can turn it around. And then he had that stretch at home last week where he looked really good. And like Siakam had been great and Mathurin was emerging and like they were hovering around 500. And okay, injuries, if they're just healthy, they could turn it around. Like all these things that for forever were just so easily tangible and touchable to say, yes, there are reasons to think this team will be better at some point. And then someone reminded me about the Clippers last year and how badly they started. And then they were first by early February. Like, yeah, okay, that's all great. Let's talk about all that. But now, since the Detroit game, and really, I think the Raptors game could be a turning point for the emotion of the team, just getting completely smoked again by a bad team. Just, they've been horrible. And there's no, those kind of feelings of tangible, let's grasp at this or talk about this thing. This could explain why they're playing bad. And this will go away. Great, they can turn it around. It all feels gone and moot and pointless. It doesn't matter. What matters is they need to play better. This season was supposed to be about winning and building off of last year and maybe not reaching the same postseason heights, but showing that there is progress in a high ceiling to this core. It hasn't happened, right? So I didn't have a point to that last segment. I don't mean that to say that there isn't a point to talking about what I just said. I don't have I'm not getting you to this big build up to say 9-14 is terrible. They need to do something. They do obviously need to do many things. They have to play better, whatever it takes to play better. Lineup changes, drastic strategy changes. We could talk about transactions in 10 days when it's actually feasible, but they have to do something, obviously. But I think that the urgency of that depends on how you feel about 9-14, and that is what I wanted to get across. 9-14 is bad. Not quite holy cow, do something major bad, but pretty close. And their next 10 days, right? Because they have a big gap between games next week. So their next 10 days could really define how they feel about this start. They got to get healthy. They've got to play better. Got to find some wins. That's why I kept saying this last week too. They did not play well in their 3-game win streak, right? But they won the game. And I said, they're not playing well, but they need to just take it, right? They got close to 500. That was huge because they were playing bad before that. Now they're playing bad again. And there's less wiggle room or light at the end of that with their schedule coming, starting with their road trip on December 19th. They need some wins. They need to play better. 9-14 isn't very good. And let's talk about some actually good stuff that happens. Horrible transition, but you guys know how I do it. I like to fit in the bad stuff at the end of good games in the last segment or the good stuff at the end of bad games in the last segment. And Johnny Furphy was great. Johnny Furphy was legitimately great in this game. We got to talk about that and a couple other things that stood out in a meaningful way that, hey, keep that in your brain. Maybe it'll matter in future games from Pacers Nets. Before we get to any of that, though, we have to talk about FanDuel because you can get ready to tackle the NFL action and jump in on some NBA hoops on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that $5 bet. How about that? That's on the FanDuel Sportsbook app, and they give you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and NBA all in one place. So when you get a hunch, it's the middle of the game, happens to everybody. You can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play, and you can see so much more right on the same page where you place your bets. You can be as informed as possible when you act on your hunches. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is on FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us our first listen today and every single day. Our second listen, Locked On NBA, Locked On Sixers, too, that I think will be interesting for me personally on this lovely Thursday. Sixers lost in Orlando despite playing decent. And the NBA show is always a great way, especially on the game night, show, to hear about the latest and greatest from around the association. Locked On, bringing you that every night. All right. Pacers stunk. They're 9-14. They're not playing well. Not a lot of stuff for them to feel good about. But there's a couple things in this game that I think mattered and stuff that they'll hope can carry into future games. It's funny as I keep doing this. Hey, here's some good stuff that happened. Maybe this can happen in future games. And outside of Jarris Walker carrying over a good game in Detroit to a good game in Memphis, very few of them have actually carried over to another game. So tonight's good stuff. I got very lucky, but I'm going to pat myself on the back for the first one. I tweeted during the second quarter when the Pacers were not playing well about Johnny Furphy because he kept sneaking in for some rebounds and they were putting him on tough defensive assignments and it was kind of going okay. And he hit I forget what shot he made. He completely biffed the layup and he did it again later in the game. But I was like, wow, Johnny Furphy looks okay out there. And he had a tough stretch after the last time I said this. So we'll see what happens this time. But he was playing pretty well. And I said, outside of making layups, I continue to think Johnny Furphy has been largely fine in his minutes outside of rookie gaps. That happen to all the rookies. And then guess what? He started the second half because he was actually doing good stuff and they needed what he was providing. He started in Quentin Jackson's place in that second half. So it was the starters with Furphy. And then he was awesome in the third quarter, fitting in with that group. He had 3 threes in that frame and had 9 points. The Pacers' second leading scorer in that quarter. Only TJ McConnell outscored him for a long time. He was the Pacers' leading scorer until a good chunk into the fourth quarter for the whole game. Johnny Furphy was the Pacers' leading scorer. 4 for 9 for the game. All of his makes from his 4 threes, which was 8 of his shot attempts besides his missed layup. He only made threes. 25 minutes off the bench, 7 rebounds and a block. Only 1 turnover. Really nice Furphy game. Career high in points and rebounds the same night. I would have led with him as subject matter had they won this game because he played decent defense. He clearly, once again, he's done this multiple times this season, showed a nose for rebounding, and he can shoot a little bit. That's a useful kind of player. Not now, right? I do not expect Johnny Furphy to contribute to Pacers wins this season. He's a 19-year-old rookie. They lost this game, right? But he is showing like useful stuff. And this game was by far his best game. And what I think allowed him to stand out, and this is the same thing that allowed Quentin Jackson to stand out, which is why Furphy took his minutes. If you can guard right now, you're going to play for the Pacers, right? That's just reality. If you can play both ends, because they do not get two-way players at all this season. If you can play both ends, which Furphy was doing tonight by shooting and defending, you're going to play a lot of minutes. That's why Quentin Jackson played 7 and Johnny Furphy played 25. 8 for Quentin Jackson. Because Jackson's offense has kind of gone away and his defense hasn't felt the same since a couple of games ago. And Furphy was great, like capital G great in this game. So he was their second most minutes off the bench guy. He had more minutes than Toppin. Toppin was pretty good again. We'll get to those bench guys in a second. But Johnny Furphy, the story of and the highlight of the good stuff section of this game. By far his best game as a pro, the most comfortable he's looked, the most effective that he has looked. The bench was good again in a lot of ways, and Furphy was part of that, but he did a lot of his work with the starters. McConnell, great again with 14 points. That's just loud, in your face, boom, boom, 8-footers all night. No one can guard them. And Obi Toppin had 13 points on his 11 shots without making threes. 4 for 5 on twos, 2 free throws, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals. I mean, Obi Toppin, 2 really good games in a row and has had a great week of late. Right when I talked about how bad his on-off numbers were, Obi Toppin has been really good since then. Obviously, I have nothing to do with that, but he has played very well the last week, and they need it. They need their bench to give them a chance. +6 for Obi Toppin, 2 straight games where, despite lots of guys being negatives in the plus-minus, he has stood out and found a way to be impactful in his minutes. What's really stood out to me recently is when McConnell and Toppin are in there together, regardless of the other 3 players, Pacers' tempo just feels like it's higher, and that was their identity last year. So if that's what it takes to look like the Pacers, they should stick with that as much as they can, even though it's tough to do. That's why I think McConnell played 28 minutes in this game. They could use him with starters, and he's been playing 5th starter minutes since Alex Golden and I talked about, hey, maybe this is the thing they should try. But they've lost both those games, so not a huge dramatic thing to take away from that here. But the bench and Furphy were really the only dominant, awesome, terrific highlights in the good stuff category for the Pacers this game. Their defense was pretty good. They lost Cam Johnson a few times. They were switching, so it's not on one guy. 7 for 13 from deep for the Nets. Definitely best offensive weapon in this game. That just can't happen. Whether it was a switch, whether it was someone too small on him, they just could not contain him. Nobody else felt particularly awesome except for Nick Claxton on this Nets team offensively. A lot of guys who were pretty good or just okay. Claxton, 7 for 8, hit his first 3 of the season, 8 rebounds. He had 16, 8, and 2 on efficient scoring. The corner 3, whatever. You were leaving him wide open for a reason, but some of the stuff on the inside was similar to the Raptors issues where the Pacers are defending the pick and roll the way they do. Someone is supposed to slide over and help or at least be a nuisance to the big man if they pop into the space. Doesn't happen at all. And all of a sudden, someone, whether it's the guys who just got screened or Myles Turner or whoever the big is, has to fly down, and they can't. They're too late. They got to rotate better on those plays if that's how they're going to defend them. Just not a good night. Nick Claxton tore the Pacers up. So Haliburton had 17 points and 8 assists in a road game. That's better than his road stats for the season. But he was just 17 points on 13 shots. Good free throw night for him, though. Pacers have just got to be better. I can go through all the good stuff I want. Furphy was great and deserved some chatter today. But they've just everyone's out of stuff to say. Not like I'm out of stuff to say as in I literally have nothing to say. I will always have something to say. But in terms of the next step for the Pacers, they just have to play better. They have to find a way to play better, or else they're going to have to look in the mirror and make some serious changes this season. I mean, you can't lose a season of a star players primes. Two. They have 2 all-stars on their team for the next at least 4 seasons. They can't waste a year of that. They just can't. They've got to figure something out, and they don't have as much time to do it because they lost again to the Nets. Friday, they play the Bulls. I'll be up there, so I'll have a podcast after that game. Tomorrow, we'll have a podcast with Kevin Bowen of 107.5 The Fan. Love talking with KB, and he tweeted quite succinctly, his only tweet during the game, do the Pacers just stink? We'll talk about that and many more topics tomorrow with him. I'm on Twitter at Tony R. East, and this podcast is there at Locked On Pacers. I'm also at Tony R. East on Blue Sky, where I tweet more like I talk, not as formal journalisty, which is maybe not the best way to do it, but it's how I've decided to do it so far. Thank you guys for listening today. Hope you enjoyed. We'll be back tomorrow, like I said, with Kevin Bowen. Until then, everybody, have a wonderful day.